What you should know about EV charging. I'm Dieter. I'm a project leader for EV prototypes in the automotive industry. So this is not my main job. I'm just conveying some additional facts that I think should be known. Today, in part one about EV charging, we'll talk about everything battery pack related. For example, why battery pack voltage is completely irrelevant for how fast it charges. We'll talk why larger batteries charge with more power than smaller batteries. We'll talk about the C rate. I will want to offer to you a mental model of how a battery works that you can use to deduce many aspects and many properties that are quite accurate, even though the mental model is so simple that I think everyone should be able to understand it. We'll talk about those car comparisons by journalists, like this car charges that fast and that fast, and what is missing and what I think journalists should ask EV manufacturers and convey to the public interested in buying an EV. On that note, if you're in the market for buying a used EV, I have some mentions about what to look out for in terms of battery health. In part number 2, which is not today, but in the next video, part number 2 we will talk about the aspects of higher battery voltage on the car design, and that has many impacts. Part number 3 will be home charging. If you have an EV or plan to buy one and charge it at home, many people might be wasting a lot of money because they don't know what to look out for. But today's part 1. Let's drop in. And oh, welcome to my 100 subscribers. Please subscribe and let's try to make it 200 subscribers. Before we go on into the realm of batteries, let's talk about what we mean when we say my car charges fast. They could mean charging duration or charging time. So the time it takes for a battery to fill up in a certain environment, let's say 10% to 80%. How long does that take? The second meaning of charging speed could be charging power, or how much energy can flow into the battery. Same thing, energy flow is power. The third meaning, if you charge your vehicle for a certain duration, how many miles or kilometers of range can you add in that time? Before we get into charging the whole car and get to know all about charging behavior, we need to take a look at a battery. So a battery is made from individual cells that are put into modules, and those modules are then put into the battery pack. All battery packs are made out of individual cells. So there are cylindrical cells. Some call them round cells, and that's the wrong name for it. The shape is a cylinder. Then there are pouch cells. Those are little pillows, and there are so-called prismatic cells. The prismatic is a very highbrow word for box. Actually, prism can be anything with straight edges. Even this thing can be a prism, but they mean box cells. Here's the Panasonic website. This is consumer information about batteries. This is not quite the same that EV manufacturers get. You can see that a cell has a limited charging voltage and a limited charging current, and all of this varies with temperature. Let's say I have a battery pack made out of 2 lithium-ion cells. Those are AA cells. I don't have lithium-ion cells at home. I wrote lithium-ion on there, so it must be true. Let's say this is my battery pack. It's made out of 2 cells. And I want to charge that battery pack. Now I could charge them. First, this one. How do I charge it? I put it in a charger. And this charger makes sure that the allowed voltage is used and the allowed current is used, and this charge within specifications. Different cells take different times to charge depending on what you buy. Let's say it takes an hour. How long does it take to charge 2 cells? Well, you could first charge that cell and then put that one in the charger. And then you charge them after one another, so it would take 2 hours. Yeah, but you can also use a combination charger. You plug them in at the same time and charge, and how long does that take? Well, it takes exactly as long as a single cell. Since each individual cell charges like it should be, both take as long as one cell. This is like the story with the woman giving birth. If it takes one woman 9 months to make a baby, 9 women cannot make a baby in 1 month. Instead, you get 9 babies in 9 months. That's the same with batteries. This is, by the way, something managers tend to forget when a project goes wrong and is delayed. They think they can make the deadline by putting more people on the project. That doesn't work most of the time. I think that managers, if they're unhappy with their wife taking 9 months to make a baby, maybe they throw more women on the job and hope that that works. Sometimes I think that's how they think. Anyway, voltage. What about voltage? Well, if you put two cells in parallel, they will have the combined voltage of a single cell, and that's how they need charging. Or you can charge two cells in a series connection, then the overall voltage will be twice as large. But in any case, each cell charges at its specifications. You can make almost arbitrary voltages with a battery pack. But as long as each cell is charged within specifications, the whole battery pack takes as much time to charge as a single cell does. What does that mean? Well, if you have a small car with a small battery, and let's say it uses the same cell as a big car with a big battery, both cars take the same duration to charge from empty to full. The larger car must charge with more energy in that time because it needs to charge more cells. So it charges with more power. Also, the larger car has more range because the battery is larger. So EVs with large batteries go further, have more range, and they charge at higher rates. Enter the Center of Automotive Management, whatever that is. That's some organization. And they once had a post on LinkedIn deciding on the innovation ability of EV manufacturers. And for some reason, only the big cars they deemed innovative and the small cars weren't innovative. And I looked at that, I was like, that's weird. Why aren't small cars innovative? So I looked at their criteria, and their criteria stated 3 factors. I forgot the third one, but one was the range of the vehicle and the charging power of the vehicle. Well, both of them are correlated with large battery packs. So they think large battery packs are a sign of innovation. Well, of course they don't think that. They don't know what they're talking about. Be wary of official sounding names of organizations. They might not be what they seem to be. Let's talk about the C rate. The C rate is an expression for charging or discharging, but relative to the size of the battery. Let's do an example. A Tesla Model S has a battery roughly of 100 kilowatt hour energy capacity. And that battery charges with a maximum of 250 kilowatt. 250 is 2.5 times larger than the battery size of 100 kilowatt hours. And that's the C rate. So the C rate is 2.5. Let's do another example. The Lucid Air has, what I can find online, a battery size of 113 kilowatt hours. It's a bit larger, and it charges at a maximum of 300 kilowatts. But dividing 300 by 113 kilowatt hours, that means it's a C rate of 2.65. That's a very similar C rate than like the Tesla Model S. As a matter of fact, it's just roughly 6% faster or higher C rate. By the way, the Lucid has an 800 volt battery pack, and the Tesla has a 400 volt battery pack. So the fact that the Lucid charges with more power, not faster, has to do with its larger battery. Also, it likely uses a slightly different cell chemistry, and more on that later. Chemical charging and discharging behavior. There are many good YouTube explanation videos out there on battery chemistry, but let me quickly give you the gist of it. So in this video, you see charging behavior as lithium ion flows from the right side to the left side. On the left side, they need to find a place in a solid structure during charging. To better understand this, let me offer a mental picture of what's going on. A word of warning, with all simplifications and all mental pictures, they have inaccuracies. So we are sacrificing the inaccuracy of the mental picture for an easy to understand and easy to make decisions on how a battery works. Enter the sponge. Here's my kitchen sponge to illustrate what's going on. When we charge the battery, think of the charge flowing from a tap into the sponge. The water immediately needs to find a place in the sponge. See how the dark blue area expands. But since more water is coming, it needs to expand more, eventually into the whole sponge. You can see how the dry sponge expands as it is filled with water. This is also what a battery does when charged. It expands as lithium ions fill the lattice structure. Now, let's pretend this isn't water, but what we need to put into the sponge is honey. The honey represents the lithium ions needing to find a place in the battery structure to store them. Why honey? Honey is very viscous when it's cold, so very stiff when it's cold, and very fluid liquid when it's hot. So all of the following behavior goes faster with higher temperatures, let's say 45 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius, and much slower at lower temperatures, let's say minus 10 degrees Celsius. Also, if it is too hot, the honey will break down, destroying or damaging the battery. For lithium ions, this is typically starting at around 55 degrees Celsius, but it varies from battery to battery. What if we overdo it and we press too much honey into the sponge because we need to charge it really quickly? This represents excessive voltage charging, with high force putting the honey into it. Well, if we pour too much honey at once and force it in there, there's no room. It needs time to expand. If we don't give it that time, it will break through the walls of the sponge, slightly damaging those walls. This is what we call aging. If we overdo it a lot, the whole thing just goes boom. Well, how could we improve this? One thing to improve this would be to have more than a single tap. What if we had 2 or 3 taps where the honey could flow into the sponge? Well, this would help the dispersion of honey, and it would reduce the resistance overall because we have many places where the honey can flow into. Have you heard of Tesla's tapless batteries? They're not tapless, they have just an insane amount of taps. They have so many taps, Tesla calls them tapless.
This was the challenge that our team set our sights on to overcome. And we did. We came up with this tabless architecture that maybe you've heard about, that basically removes the thermal problem from.
They can more easily fill the battery because they have so many taps, and this actually results in a ludicrously small internal resistance of the battery, which is helping many aspects. Also, it charges and discharges a lot faster. You can imagine that a battery structure with very large pores can quickly take in the lithium ions because they have a lot of room and not so many seats available, but also there are fewer ions that can park there. Those are called high drain batteries or high charge batteries. Then there are high energy batteries where you have a very fine structure where parking into the lattice structure takes a long time because it's difficult. So there are different ways of making batteries. Now that we have this mental picture in place, let me tell you the vernacular for the chemistry. Our honey is lithium ions during charging. The sponge structure is called the lattice structure, and putting pieces into a lattice structure is called intercalation. So that's a fancy word for parking things in a structure or putting something into a structure. So if you pour honey into a sponge, you're intercalating honey into that sponge. With that knowledge, next time you're out clubbing and you're trying to hit on a girl, say, "Can I intercalate into your lattice structure?" Let me know how that worked out for you. With this picture in mind, we can talk about the battery management system, or BMS. And we can talk about what this needs to do while you drive your car. See, a battery is capable of discharging very quickly if it is fully charged, so there's honey everywhere, even a lot of honey right underneath the tap. And you know, the honey presses out of that sponge while discharging, while full-on power acceleration. Okay, no problem. There's honey underneath that tap and it can easily flow into the tap. But once you take away that honey, there is a gap. And that gap will need to be refilled quite slowly. That takes seconds to minutes. So if you full on power, full acceleration, what happens is the battery management system says, well, the first few seconds you get the full power of the battery. The longer you full out accelerate, the less honey is near the tap, and I need to reduce the available power to the electric machines because I need to wait for the honey to flow underneath the tap. What if I don't wait? I will destroy the sponge, aging it a lot quicker, even up to full out damaging it. You're in a racetrack and you full out accelerate. So the honey near the tap gets taken away. Okay. Well, the next corner comes and you full brake and you recuperate. You can recuperate in that instance with very high power because that's charging the battery recuperation, because there's room. There's room underneath the tap. If there's room underneath the tap, you can charge it very quickly. So on a racetrack, everything happens underneath that tap. Quick out, quick in. That's possible. Still, if you take more out than in, which is typical, you will reduce the available power over time on that racetrack. So this is the holy grail of battery management. The battery management needs to figure out a model when it's safe to charge high amounts or discharge high C rates, charge high C rates, and when it's not. This is also what distinguishes an EV battery management system from consumer battery charging. The battery management system needs to estimate the fill state of ions over the battery and measure the battery temperature. Well, it doesn't need to. There are simplifications typically in the functions we drive, but that's what people aspire to. Let's talk about charge cycles. Every time a battery charges and discharges, that's called a cycle. And battery manufacturers state that the number of cycles that they guarantee. Typically, modern batteries are guaranteed to last between 1,000 cycles and 3,000 cycles, maybe even 4,000 cycles. So after those cycles, the battery energy content has dropped to 80% of what it was new. Okay, so you might think that 80%, that's quite great. No, it's not. See, battery ages linearly until 80%, and after 80%, it violently breaks down to not working very well anymore at all. You notice that with your phone. It works quite okay a while, then it's not so great for a while, and then suddenly it can't hold a charge for a minute. For all of the people who think that they can use old car batteries when they have like 80% of life left in their house as house batteries, well, you do you, but I'll talk about more of this on part 3 of my video, everything about home charging that you should know. For now, subscribe to go to part 3 and part 2. Let's go back to my main point. A modern battery will last between 1,000 and 3,000 cycles, and for an example, let's use 2,000 cycles, which is what today's batteries can easily do. If your car has a range of 500 kilometers or 300 miles, then a battery with a 2,000 cycle guarantee will give your car a lifetime of 1 million kilometers or 600,000 miles. That's quite a lot. A typical combustion engine car is designed to last 250,000 kilometers, so EV batteries could potentially last 4 times longer than combustion engine vehicles, and this is not an exaggeration. Batteries are that good. But if you somehow overcharge the battery, it will charge faster. But it will also age quicker. If you don't overdo it immensely and the battery explodes, you will age it a little faster. You gain higher C rates, so shorter time duration for charging, and you give lifetime. EV manufacturers now have a choice, and they negotiate that with the battery manufacturer. How long do they want the battery to last, and how do they want to charge it? Let's take some sports car manufacturer. Let's say you're a rich dentist and you buy a sports car for trips on the weekend, and you might resell that car after 3 years after only weekend driving. You might rack up 50,000 kilometers only, and you just paid full price over the sports car that you plan to sell after a few years. You don't even come close to its lifetime. Would you prefer the battery to last maybe only 500,000 kilometers instead of 1 million and therefore charge faster on your weekend trips, saving you time? How about 250,000 kilometer battery lifetime for even faster charging? That might make sense. What if you're a traveling salesman racking up 100,000 kilometers per year? You could be on the phone with customers during charging times, and very likely you could hit that 500,000 kilometer mark of your car, but only if the EV manufacturer decided to do that. They need to decide to give you higher lifetime for slightly not so fast charging. So there's a compromise to be made between C rates, high charging, high discharging, and lifetime, and therefore potentially used car value. One other thing is buying used EVs is if you have 2 cars, a small car with a small battery, a large car with a large battery, both of them have a mileage of, let's say, 100,000 kilometers, which one do you buy? Well, the large battery has seen fewer cycles. It needs fewer cycles to do that same mileage. So smaller car batteries age faster for the same mileage. So if you're in the market for a used EV, the fewer charge cycle your battery has, the better, and then therefore the larger batteries are probably in a better shape than the smaller batteries. Of course, you still need to ask, well, how many fast charge cycles did it see? Maybe the only charged it at home. That would be good. Maybe not. You need to ask that. And this is kind of offsetting the higher CO2 cost for the large battery. The large battery can be used for a lot longer. If we decide to use EVs for a lot longer, which I hope we do, because they could last a long time. Many journalists typically do this. They typically take a range of cars, very different cars. Some of them, this battery pack, larger, smaller, sports cars, normal cars, and they happen to have different voltages, and they test them by charging them from empty to full, and then they measure the time, how long it takes to charge them, and how high the overall power is, not even the C rate, just the overall power. Is it 250 kilowatt? Is it 350 kilowatt? And then they say, well, it's better if it charges with more power, total power, and it's better if it charges quicker. Then at the end, they come out and say, well, the newer 800-volt cars, they charge a lot quicker, because most new cars are 800 volts, right? They charge a lot quicker, so they are better. 800 volt is better. It's like, no, maybe newer stuff is better. I will talk about the implications of 800 volt versus 400 volt on the car design and the charger in the next part 2 of this video. But for now, we have learned it has absolutely zero influence on the battery pack. Back to my point about journalist tests. They only test how fast a car charges, but not how fast the battery ages. Sure, they can test the second part, but they could ask. What they test incentivizes OEMs to do well on those tests. And therefore, maybe OEMs will sacrifice the potential 1 million or 500,000 kilometer lifetime for slightly faster charging, no matter what their customers' use case is. And the journalists, they don't even ask. So with all of this, what journalists should be asking EV manufacturers, what journalists should try to test, but don't. Number 1, how many cycles is the battery designed for when slow charging at home? How many cycles is the battery designed for when fast charging at maximum rates? On full acceleration, how long does it take for the battery available power from the BMS to drop to 80%? How high C rates does the battery accept during low temperatures, let's say 0 degrees Celsius? Does the EV manufacturer guarantee those numbers? So they designed that in-house. Those numbers are negotiated with the battery manufacturer, but they don't tell you. Journalists, make them tell you. And only then, after these questions, ask, how long does it take to charge the battery under normal conditions? So journalists, you're influencing OEMs into a direction you may not want to influence them. And stop with the voltage. Wait for my part 2, and then you will understand them. Thank you so much for watching. This was a long video. I hope it was fun to watch. I hope you learned something. I learned a lot making videos. Oh, by the way, if you liked this video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video, give me an up yours. And comment. I love to see your comments, because I still figure out who actually is my audience. And let's work on these 200 subscribers. See you soon.